Good evening, everyone. It is November 8th. Do we have the right date? It's November 8th. Okay, excellent. This meeting precedes a council meeting that we had yesterday evening, and I was in Brockville today for county council meeting, so this is my third council meeting in 24 hours. Okay, so just wanted to thank council colleagues, staff, the OPP, the Legion, and members of the Indigenous Advisory Circle who gathered together today for a ceremony to recognize Indigenous Veterans Day. So it was great to be able to do that for the third year in a row. And for those of you who like to attend the Remembrance Day ceremony in front of the Cenotaph, of course, that's happening on the 11th. Finally, we just want to alert you to the fact that community grant delegations are upcoming. So council colleagues, I'm sure your calendars are marked for Tuesday, November 14th and Thursday, November 16th. And those are for virtual delegations. So we'll meet virtually for receipt of the proposals, presentations from applicants for the community grants process. And then a heads up that the November 21st council meeting has been canceled due to a very low volume of business that can be easily accommodated on December 5th. So congratulations. You have an evening back in November. So with that in mind, we'll move to open our Committee of Adjustment. This is Committee of Adjustment number 7, held on Wednesday, November 8th at the Kemptville Campus Parish Hall. I'm going to declare the meeting open and look to council colleagues for disclosures of interest. Any disclosures, colleagues? Okay. Approval of the minutes from October 11th. Can I have a mover and a seconder for approval of the minutes? Thank you. Councillors Barclay and Strachian, and I'll call the vote on that. All in favor? Good, that carries. And now we are going to move into a public hearing for a minor variance application in regards to 608-616 Fisher Crescent. So the Committee of Adjustment will now hold a public meeting to consider an application for lands located at 608-616 Fisher Crescent, Block 54 of Plan 15M39, Township of Oxford-on-Rideau, now the Municipality of North Grenville, to reduce the minimum required interior side yard setback from 1.55 meters to 1.40 meters for a block of townhouses. I must advise you that this meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or concerns you may have. If an appellant does not provide submissions at this public meeting or written submissions before a decision is made, the Ontario Land Tribunal may refuse to consider objections. Debbie Wood, who is here, hi Debbie, as Secretary Treasurer, will keep a record summary of this meeting. Any persons who wish further notice of the committee's decision can speak with Debbie. Are there people here for this public meeting? Not seeing any. Okay, great. So I'll pass it over to Ms. Martin. I think she's going to give us a short presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll just wait for the slide deck to come up. Oh, it's not the right slide deck.
Perhaps you can start talking just to keep things rolling.
Yes. So our application tonight for a minor variance is for a block of townhouse units within Phase 5 of the Equinell subdivision. So the request is to reduce the interior yard setback from 1.55 meters to 1.4 meters. So when they were designing the units and they laid it out on the site plan, it was determined that they did not meet the minimum interior yard setback. So upon staff's review at the building permit stage, we flagged the minor variance would be necessary to seek a reduction of essentially 0.15 meters to the interior side yard. There are access easements of 1.2 meters that run along both sides of the property. However, the proposed reduction would not encroach into the access easement. So essentially, they're still maintaining that access easement, not encroaching, and requesting a very minor relief from the zone standard for the interior side yard setback.
Great.
And in the, sorry, Your Worship, in the report, there is a site plan that just shows you the relief that's being sought, so that 1.4 meters. I do want to note that there is, the front porch is 1.3 meters to the property line, but we do allow for we do allow for the encroachment of the porch is slightly into the interior side yard. So there's just showing where the relief is being sought. It's at the rear of the property, so. And that, we had no comments from any neighbors or residents because it's a new phase of development. There are no neighbors currently. And Public Works would just provided a comment regarding the easement and just ensuring that the development didn't encroach. And we had no comments from the RVCA. So it is recommended that the committee support the recommendation to reduce the interior side yard setback from 1.55 meters to 1.4 meters.
Great, thank you. Colleagues, any concerns or questions here? Seems pretty straightforward. Look for a mover and a seconder then. Councillor Strachan, Deputy Mayor, thank you. The recommendation is before you. And fundamentally what we're moving tonight is providing relief from 15.4.1 5.2 to reduce minimum required interior side yard setback from townhouse dwelling from 1.55 meters to 1.40 meters. I'll call the question then. All in favor, colleagues? Thank you. Wonderful. That carries. And I believe that's our only public hearing this evening. Is that right, Ms. Wood?
Just need the adjournment.
Yes, indeed. Okay. So we'll look for an adjournment. I'll go in reverse order. Deputy Mayor Barclay, Councillor Strachan, thank you. I'll call the question to adjourn our Committee of Adjustment at 6:44 p.m. All in favor? Good. Thank you. That concludes our Committee of Adjustment, if I'm not mistaken. Excellent. All right. So we will move on then to our council meeting. We are going to start with calling this meeting to order and approving the agenda. So look to council colleagues for a motion around approval of the agenda, and then we'll go to land acknowledgement. Thank you, Councillor Strachan. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Barclay. I'll call the question on that. All in favor? Good, thank you. And we'll welcome Councillor O'Sullivan. She is just coming onto the stage now. Welcome, Councillor O'Sullivan. We've just gotten through Committee of Adjustment, so you're just in time. So I'll look to someone to read the land acknowledgement, please. All right, Councillor Strachan, go ahead.
The municipality of North Grenville acknowledges that the municipality operates on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe. We honor the historic relationship of the Haudenosaunee and Huron-Wendat peoples to this land. We recognize all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who now call North Grenville their home. We respect and support the need for cultivating a strong relationship with all Indigenous peoples, and we look forward to continuing this conversation and fostering the path towards reconciliation.
Thank you. So any disclosures of interest tonight, colleagues, in regards to perceived or real financial benefit or loss when it comes to any of the matters this evening? Okay. Thank you. Then we'll move on. We have our first bylaw, sorry, I apologize, for our first public meeting in regards to zoning bylaw amendment 0823 4062 County Road 43. Ms. Martin, I don't have the script for the public meeting before me. Perhaps you can read it on my behalf.
Perfect. So council will now hold a public meeting to consider zoning bylaw amendments for the following properties: 4062 County Road 43, 686 County Road 44, and 640 Jig Street. I must advise you that this meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or concerns you may have with respect to a proposed zoning bylaw amendment. If an appellant does not provide oral submissions at this public meeting or written submissions before council adopts the proposed amendment, the Ontario Land Tribunal may refuse to consider their objections. Any persons who wish further notice of council's decisions concerning this matter should give their full name, address, and postal code to the Director of Planning following adjournment of the public meeting. Following the presentation from staff for each matter being considered this evening, council will hear from the applicant, followed by members of the public who wish to comment either for or against the proposal. Following any comments from the public, the applicant will be offered an opportunity to respond to questions raised. All persons wishing to address the proposal will ask their questions through the chair. Please state your name, address, and postal code prior to addressing the council. Please be advised that any member of the public who should wish to provide written comment regarding the proposed zoning bylaw amendment can still do so after the public meeting is adjourned, and written comment can be received up until the zoning bylaw amendment is considered by council. It is intended that the zoning council will consider the zoning amendments this evening. Council members may also wish to ask questions through the chair to those making presentations.
Thank you, Ms. Martin, I appreciate that. And I believe you'll provide the overview of this particular amendment, proposed amendment? Oh, Mr. Mosher. Welcome, Mr. Mosher. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, so if we could go to the next slide, please, that'd be great. Or I advance. Okay. So this is an application that's being made at Randy Rose Automotive. It's being made to address existing non-compliance issues at the property. The effect of the requested amendments would be to allow a reduction in the interior side yard for accessory structures only. We'll get into that a little bit shortly. There have been some additional requests made to allow shipping containers to be used as a permanent structure, and that's something that is not a permitted building material at this point in time in North Grenville, so there's been a request to allow it at this site. In terms of materials that were submitted as part of the completed application, there was the application form itself. This is the subject property with an air photo from 2019. You can see the property in question. Like I say, the air photo is a little bit older. It's changed since this period of time. But what you can see on the screen is the larger white roofed building at the southern portion of the property. That's the commercial automotive garage. There's a blue roofed structure at the northern end of the property that was previously a storage facility. It's now been refurbished, is in the process of being converted to a paint spray booth. Around the area, you see it's actually nestled in an area near the Rideau Estates subdivision. So there's rural residential to the east, to the north, and then there's the Tomlinson Quarry over to the west. This is what the land use designation looks like. It's kind of interesting and odd in the fact that this property has been included within the rural residential designation. I'm not sure entirely the history of this decision, whether it's a land use error in the mapping, but it is what it is, and so that's the policy that we have to address as staff. The zoning of the property is, this is an older schedule, but it's actually highway commercial with the special exception C329. The holding has previously been removed. I believe that was done in 2015. And again, you can see the surrounding zone contexts, rural residential basically around other than the quarry to the west. This site plan does show some of the details that I had hoped to discuss. This, again, came about as the result of some compliance issues. You can see at the southern end of the image, there's buildings F, E, D, and C. And when we attended the site in April of this year, it was determined that those buildings at the rear, or the south portion of the properties, F, E, D, and C, just right here, were over the property boundary. So when we attended the site, we made the individual aware of this and asked for there to be a remedy. So most of those structures were removed and replaced to the, over to this area here, this parking area. And that's where they're being stored on a temporary basis. So part of the issue is that the rear yard for this property is from the edge of this building. So this back wall, this south wall here, that is the rear yard. And then the property boundary for an accessory structure, even in a highway commercial zone, is also the same as over here. So the fact that these buildings were relocated temporarily here was good, and that it got them off the property boundary, but it still didn't solve the problem of it's not complying with the side yard and the rear yard setbacks. Some of them are also shipping containers, and so for that reason, there's been staff is recommending, it wasn't the specific request, but on site and speaking with the individual, he indicated that he wanted to keep some of these shipping containers and obtain proper building permits to allow for them. And so what staff would propose is that if council agrees to the relocation of these structures over there, that there be a relief just for the accessory structures only, not for any principal buildings. So any automotive garage, anything like that in the future would still maintain those 7.5 meter setbacks. The accessory structures would be at least allowed to go to 1.2 meters. It was a request to have a 0-foot property boundary, but staff doesn't think that's prudent in case of future when there would be eaves or something overhanging, and just from a drainage perspective. 1.2 meters is the minimum for residential accessory. It seemed to be good here as well. So we're proposing a couple of unique definitions that would be added into the zone bylaw. The net effect of these would be that modified shipping containers could be permitted use on this property, and then by being a modified shipping container, it makes a distinction that there's been some modifications to the structures so that they would be of a concern from a fire code. or fire hazard. Staff thinks that this application is ultimately consistent with the PPS because it promotes an appropriate use of the rural lands and helps achieve the vision of building a strong community. The use is existing, and this is almost a minor zoning application in just requesting to allow for these modified shipping containers and the reduction in interior side yard setback. It would also not preclude or hinder existing uses around the site, in particular the mineral aggregate. From a county's official plan perspective, it does occur within a rural area. It's continuing to promote a diversified economy and, again, protects those mineral aggregate uses. So from a municipal official plan perspective, when we look at ours, again, it's rural residential, and you would not think that a highway commercial automotive garage would be a permitted use in the rural residential designation. However, our official plan does say that if a use is located in a designation that is not traditional for it, it can still continue, so long as there's not any aggravation to existing uses that are enjoying their conforming rights. This would be termed a non-conforming right. So from a staff perspective, when we look at our official plan, the request here for the minor setback reductions and the structures maintains the current non-conforming use of the property. It's not changing that it's an automotive garage, it is that. The relief for the setbacks wouldn't aggravate adjacent legal conforming uses. A 1.2 meter setback would be seen to be similar to the residential adjacent setbacks that would be allowed. And there's already been certain MECP approvals obtained for operations at the site. So from a pollution perspective, those things, at least to the extent that the approvals have been granted, are in place. We did receive a letter of no comment from Enbridge Gas, a letter of no comment from Bylaw Services, a comment from Emergency and Protective Services that the storage requirements under the Ontario Building Code and Fire Code would need to be met. Also, there would be requirements for building permits for these structures. And we received a letter of no objection from Rideau Valley Conservation Authority. At the time the slide deck was prepared, we hadn't received any formal comments. I did have a phone call with a neighbor, but no formal comments came as a result of that. So staff's opinion that council approve the requested relief here for these accessory structures to be allowed to be with a reduced interior and rear yard side yard setback, and also to allow for modified shipping containers to be a permitted building and structure at the property. That concludes the report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Yes, Councillor Barclay.
I have three questions.
Great.
Okay, all right. First of all, you mentioned that shipping containers require building permits.
The way that we're proposing to define it through you, Your Worship, yes, they would require those building permits. They're structure that's greater than 165 square feet. And they're going to require modifications in this instance so that there could be venting, so that if anything was stored in there, that it would, you know, in the event of an explosion or something like that, it just properly allows for.
And the applicant is willing to get those building permits? He's agreed?
We don't know formally. Like, we've identified the need that you will need building permits ultimately. So I think it's understood that if this zoning bylaw amendment is granted, that's step one, and then
Right.
step two becomes those building permits.
Okay. The other thing is, there's two definitions. Are we creating a second definition? There's permanent shipping containers and now modified shipping containers.
Yes.
So we're creating two definitions.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Just to distinguish between what is a modified shipping container versus, a modified one would be the one that now has the holes and the openings and the things. And then the permanent means, okay, that's an actual permitted use on the property. And we're adding those definitions in. It could set some groundwork for other similar applications in future, but we're just focused on this one for now.
Okay. Third and final one, I'm sorry, through you, Madam Mayor. There's been no comment from two of the agencies we usually contact.
Which two?
I forget, Rideau Valley and there's, which is different than no objection. We just haven't received a comment?
Apologies. So
Yeah.
we received letters of no comments from those agencies.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Does that mean they hadn't had enough time to respond or comment, or?
I can't speak for
Yeah.
their level of service.
Okay.
But I just know that they wrote back to say that based on the application, they didn't have any comments.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, just to clarify, why wouldn't they say they have no objection? What's the difference between no comment and no objection?
Yeah, I'm not entirely,
Okay. I'll leave that for them, I guess. Thank you.
Welcome.
Councillor Strachan?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Peckford, to Deputy Director Mosier. So the setbacks and the rest of the report, I have no concerns with. I do have questions regarding shipping containers. Not too long ago, we had conversations with a business owner who had shipping containers being used, and it was highlighted to him that it was not appropriate, it was not allowed under our bylaws. And I see there's no comment from Bylaw Services. So I guess I'm going to jump in on this one to wonder why there would be no comment if it is in contradiction to our bylaws, and if we are setting the stage to formally change the bylaw that we have right now to allow shipping containers.
Through you, Your Worship. Yeah, I think it's a very important distinction. We would be, like, if we add these definitions, it does set the stage that others could request something similar. There are a lot of moving pieces when it comes to shipping containers from our office. So I'm trying to focus on the application at hand, and when I attended the site with the bylaw officer who was also present, it was acknowledged to the owner that shipping containers are not a permitted use. So they said they desired to keep them on site. And so we said, if that's something you desire, we think it a prudent way forward that there be this other way of doing it. If you want to have it. Ultimately becomes council's decision if you wish to say, yes, they could have these modified shipping containers at this property or not. The zone bylaw as it's written today prohibits them outright, but we see them everywhere. So this is, I guess, staff's hybrid attempt to sort of say, if you wish to make it something that's legal, because we have to look at everything when we're making our recommendations, this would be a way to do it for this specific application.
So is it the intent then to bring forward a change to the bylaw to allow, within reason, perhaps within the, modifications required and so on for other business owners who have shipping containers currently in use to make sure that they are now conforming and not going against our bylaws?
I'll take that one, Your Worship. So it's certainly a discussion we've been having internally with building and bylaw staff. I don't think anyone can drive around this community and not see a shipping container being used, both from a residential perspective and a commercial perspective. There are municipalities who have taken approaches where a building permit is required based not just on their size, but to modify the building to be used for that intent, which would include those modifications that Deputy Director Mosher mentioned in regards to ventilation. But it's certainly something that we are going to put our minds towards in the new year as to how do we address the proliferation of shipping containers. They're being seen as an alternative building method and form for some individuals for housing and others for accessory structures for storage. So certainly looking at how can we, is there a way in which the municipality can allow for them in a way that, we're meeting our building code and those regulations and, providing those opportunities, whether it's for storage or housing.
Thank you. And I guess just one final question on this topic is then if there are requests from residents, whether they be for commercial use or for residential use, if they would like to use shipping containers, whether they exist on their properties now or they want to bring them in new, then the process would be to go to the planning department and have a conversation, at which point it'll be deemed whether or not that's an appropriate use. Is that correct?
So through Your Worship to Councillor Strachan, the process currently would be that if, absolutely, they would come and talk to the municipality, to planning and building staff, where we would identify that based on the current zoning regulations, it's not a permitted use. The individual could make an application on their own behalf for their property to add that use and add that definition as to what they're allowed to do. And that's up until such a time that we do amend the zoning bylaw and provide some further guidance. So once the zoning bylaw, if in the future council amends the zoning bylaw to allow for modified shipping containers for specific uses and in specific zones, that could open up more opportunity, but at this time it would be a site-specific application like we are seeing this evening.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. As this is a public meeting, I'd like to ask, is the applicant or the members of the public in the room for this particular application? Does anyone else wish to speak to this application? If not, then I will close the public meeting unless there's other questions from council colleagues. I'm not seeing any. So with that, I will ask for a mover and a seconder for the recommendation that council approve zoning bylaw amendment, applications ZBA 0823 for the lands known municipally as 4062, County Road 43, to vary rear yard and side yard setbacks within the existing C329 zone to allow for additional on-site storage. With that, I'm going to look for a mover and a seconder. Thank you. Councillor Sullivan, Deputy Mayor Barclay, thank you. Any final comments or questions? Not seeing any, so I will call the question. All in favor, please? Thank you. Okay, zoning bylaw amendment 0923, 686 County Road 43, Star Toilets. I believe the public meeting notice we read was inclusive of all our public meetings. Is that correct, Ms. Martin? Okay. So then we'll ask you to present on this file. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So our second zoning bylaw amendment this evening is for 686 County Road 44. Here you can see the property is located adjacent to Highway 416 and the off-ramp, on and off-ramp that is at that intersection with County Road 44. You have McGovern Road here to the south. So the property did go through a site plan application. I do apologize that the lighting in this room doesn't really illuminate the site plan, but it was provided as part of the report package. The property is currently developed with a mobile septic and portable toilet business, including a shop. There's an outdoor storage area up here to the north. There are buffer areas and buffer strips, and I'll go through a bit of the history of the Planning Act applications on the property, and access does come in off of County Road 44. So a zoning bylaw amendment was passed by council in 2020 that established the portable toilet and mobile septic business on the subject lands. A site plan control application was entered into in 2021, which entrenched the engineering and civil documents for the development of the site from a site plan process. So that would have included grading and drainage, stormwater management, photometrics, and the site plan itself. There was a minor variance request to reduce a buffer requirement for a portion of the property. That was to the property that, if we go back to the map here, it was the buffer area right here to the property that's adjacent. It is surrounded by 686 County Road 44. And then in 2023, this year, applications were made for severances, which, and I'll flip back to the map, was adding some additional buffer space lands to the properties on McGovern Road. So surrounding land uses include rural residential. There are rural residential uses adjacent to the site. Highway 416, as was shown on the original map, and there is a quarry within 500 meters of the property. So when it comes to aggregate resources, when you are within 500 meters of a quarry, we do review those policies to ensure that there's no negative impact on the operation of those aggregate resources. So in review of our policies, we looked to the provincial policy statement being our policy document at the provincial level. So it was staff's determination that the proposed application was consistent with the policies of the provincial policy statement because it promotes an appropriate use of rural lands and it helps achieve the vision of building a strong, healthy community and then helps facilitate economic growth. And it was also determined that the proposed uses that the applicant is seeking to add to their property would not preclude or hinder the adjacent mineral aggregate operation. In regards to the United Counties official plan, which provides policy direction for the region of Leeds and Grenville, it was determined that the proposed application met the intent of the county's official plan because it occurs within the rural area, it promotes a diversified economy, and it protects the mineral aggregate resources for their long-term use. And in regards to our own municipal official plan, which sets development policies for North Grenville, it was determined that the proposed policy was consistent because the development maintains and supports the historic relationship between our rural and urban communities, and it doesn't take away from it. The commercial uses are envisioned by the official plan in the rural area for commercial uses, and the use is appropriate with the surrounding area, and there is buffering and screening that was identified as part of the site plan control agreement for the original development of the site. So the applicant is requesting to add some additional permitted uses to their property. This includes a commercial garage, equipment sales and rental repair, office, custom workshop, service outlet, and warehouse. Provisions are being added for outdoor storage, which could include the storage of recreational vehicles, And then outdoor storage related to those commercial uses shall be in the side or rear yard, and they have to be screened from view. Storage buildings and temporary storage buildings are being requested to be added as well as a contractor's yard or trades establishment. The zoning would maintain the requirement for the visual screening of the property, whether it's through a fence or natural vegetation. We did receive some concerns and comments from a neighboring resident regarding the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. Some of those concerns were in general related to adding some more additional permitted uses, but as well as the relationship of drainage to their property that has occurred through the development of the 686 County Road 44. And I do want to note that that individual is here this evening and does wish to speak and provide representation as part of this process. We, at the time of the report being submitted, had not received any letters of concern from Enbridge Gas, and there were no concerns from bylaw services and emergency and protective services, and there was no objection on the part of the Conservation Authority. And what I do want to note is that when there is further development of the property, when it comes to the establishment of further outdoor storage or establishing a new building on the property, an amendment would be required to the existing site plan control application. So the municipality does retain the ability to still direct and ensure that the appropriate studies are conducted in regards to stormwater management, grading and drainage, and site development, should additional uses be established requiring additional buildings on the property. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Amy before we go to any members of the public or the applicant? Is the applicant here, Ms. Martin?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
And their agent.
Okay, perfect. So, colleagues, I see Councillor Sullivan, Deputy Mayor Barkley. We'll start there. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you to Director Martin. So one of my questions, if there's a concern about drainage now, I wanted to clarify the outdoor storage space for potential storage of recreational vehicles. Would that area be gravel, permeable, or would it be a paved area?
Through your worship to Councillor Sullivan, I would defer to the applicant on that question. I do want to note that there is an existing, if you recall from the application back in 2020, there was a road that had been put in and an existing graveled area, which is the area that's currently being used for the outdoor storage of the portable toilet business. I would imagine that that would be part of the consideration for further outdoor storage, but wanted to note that any additions of outdoor storage or expansion of that would need an amendment to the site plan agreement, which time the type of materials would be identified. But I would defer that to Mr. Rivington and his agent to provide some more clarity on. And I do believe we have a microphone, that we can pass around the audience. It's coming, so that way we can hear you for the audio recording.
Okay. On your question about whether it be gravel or paved or asphalt, it would be gravel as we've done the rest of the yard. The asphalt, my pockets aren't that deep to asphalt the whole yard.
If you can just speak
Okay.
into the mic. There you
Is
go.
that better?
That works. Thank you.
Okay. We would be gravel we'd be doing with, or crushed stone or whatever. We wouldn't be paving. That's much too expensive to be. The main reason we're asking for the zoning is because the prior zoning we had allowed us to do our business, but it really painted us into a corner if for financing or anything like that, for refinancing and things like that, because the institution doing the financing would look at it and it's only allowed for one use. And if they always look at things in the worst case scenario. So if they had to take the property over, what could they do with it? So that's the main reason why we're asking for the zoning change. We've only asked for the types of zoning which the municipality has already approved in other areas for the same type of properties. so.
Okay,
And the question about the drainage?
yes, go ahead.
Basically, if I understand correctly, last spring, the property in question, basically the whole property basically drains north to south, okay? And in our site plan, where we put our driveway in, we had to put a ditch and then a berm beside that. And so that berm we put in didn't let the water drain off our property. And last spring, it was a wet spring, and she had a considerable amount of water, which I didn't realize. However, the berm does stop at the front County Road 44, and our ditch there, we have it blocked, so we cannot drain out into the municipal ditch. However, their land can drain off there, but I think it's a little higher there than the other parts. So what we're going to do is we're going to open that berm in one location, just the width of a bucket of a backhoe, and so it can drain off because our lane going down there, we have 3 culverts in there, one at the road, one at the T, where it turns anyways, and then one in the very center of it. And so we're going to do it right in front of that culvert that's in the center so that it can relieve any water buildup on their property, because it's not really going to affect us because we have a large low area there for collecting water anyways as part of our site plan.
Okay, good.
Anything else? No?
Is there anything else to add on those issues?
I'll just be very quick. I'm the agent acting for Mr. Rivington, so I just wanted to clarify, and we really appreciate working with Ms. Martin. I don't want to add anything to her presentation because we're just very supportive of what's already been provided by staff. Just by way of simple clarification, I just wanted to mention that Mr. Rivington basically, prior to going through rezoning, had a number of permitted uses on the property before 2020 and applied to add mobile toilet rental as an additional permitted use. And the zoning that was put in place and was agreed to by all the parties at the time basically restricted the property to only allow toilet rental. So if you can imagine, if the land were ever to be sold, you'd have to find somebody that had a mobile toilet rental business on the property. So that is the problem, and that is why the zoning bylaw amendment was submitted, to allow just for basically flexibility and for the land to retain its value and to have similar types of land uses permitted that have storage, contractor yard. They're all just similar uses with similar impacts. And there isn't any proposed new development on the property today. If there was, as Ms. Martin explained, then the applicant would have to go through site plan approval for any additional development on the property, basically. So just for a little bit of clarification, thank you.
Okay, so thank you, we appreciate that. Councilor Sullivan, Deputy Mayor Barkley, we're good? Okay, so then with that, I'll just invite members of the public. Is there members of the public who wish to speak? Okay, so you'll need to use the mic, please.
Thank you to the council members and the director. I appreciate being able to voice some of my concerns. They're rather lengthy, but I will try to be as quick as possible. In reference to Mr. Rivington's request to change the property due to the limitations it imposes, my first question is, why buy the land knowing that it is going to be very limited?
And sorry, we just need your name and address. for
Oh,
the
I'm sorry,
formal
Catherine
record.
Tina Bradshaw,
Great.
684 County Road 44, and 686 borders me on 3 sides.
Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe just, why don't you ask all your questions and then we can
Okay.
answer them all at once? I think that'll
Perfect.
improve efficiency.
Okay, that
Thank
would
you.
be great.
Okay.
So what my question is, if he would have already been aware of the limitations, any realtor or refinancing or financing mortgage people would have, been able to provide information to him, so he would have known the limitations ahead of time. So I understand that it makes it harder for selling in the later days, if that is his determination, but it's based on a lot of what-ifs. And I find that a little bit challenging, that there's so many unknowns. I appreciate knowing that he would have to go through an assessment and it would have to get approved, so that is good news on my part. I know that the proximity to the 416 is wonderful for his business, and that there are similar construction or other quarry-related businesses around, so it does support that. Unfortunately, it was zoned rural residential before, and I was hoping it would stay that way. One of the comments I want to make is my realtor already has told me my residential residence has decreased by $50,000 currently. If there's another reassessment or future planning of other commercial things, such as was listed in the slideshow, my realtor has advised me my property would decline a further $50,000 to $100,000. So that's a significant impact on me as a residential owner. So much of the plans that Mr. Rivington shared with me, because he's been very good at making communication, contacting me, and letting me know what his plans were. However, pretty much all of his plans have always changed. The location of the garage moved. The fact that there was only going to be storage, that is not consistent. I was advised there'd be no traffic except early morning and early evening. That is not happening. There's people there as early as 5 a.m. and as late as midnight. Initially, the property to the north of my home was not going to be used. It has now been graveled and clear cut, and there's toilets that now surround me all the time. There is also currently RV storage on this property that is not outlined in the uses that are currently allowed. So, unfortunately, although I do appreciate Mr. Rivington's openness in communicating with me, he seems to change anything to suit his own needs. So, if I recall correctly, the roadway was constructed and his garage was built before zoning was actually in place. I could be wrong, and I appreciate it if the director could set me straight if I am. And when I did ask him, he said he couldn't wait for zoning. It would take too long. So I'm wondering, based on this, what else is he potentially going to put in, develop, without council approval? So the current uses of this property is construction storage yard, accessory warehouse, and office, which he does have all of those things. And it says that the outdoor storage would consist of construction fencing, portable toilets, and pickup trailers. He currently has more than that. There is an RV stored. There are sewage trucks stored. There is transfer of sewage from small trucks to big trucks, thereby making a sewage smell very often. The outdoor toilets are being cleaned directly behind my house. I realize they're already pumped out. I don't know to what degree that is. But if you're washing it down with soap and water, which he has confirmed with me, that's still going into the water table and going into the ground. And that does not appear to be part of the current uses for that land. I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous. So I see from the slideshow that municipality has determined that the potential reassessment or zoning is consistent with environmental policies. But if he's cleaning with soap and water, does that fall within the parameters allowed on this property? If he's transferring sewage waste from one smaller truck to another, is that consistent with environmental policies? So my last question is with the drainage. I just wanted to know from the council and from Mr. Rivington, will the new drainage be my responsibility to pay for? If so, I cannot go through with it because I just do not have the funds. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So maybe we can start with Ms. Martin and then give the applicant an opportunity to respond. Then I'll go back to council for any remaining questions. Go ahead, Ms. Martin.
Thank you, Your Worship. As for the timing of building permit application and site works in regards to approvals from the municipality previously, I would have to do a review of the file as to see the timing of this work, so unfortunately I wouldn't have any answer for you this evening. But I do want to mention when it comes to our environmental policies in our official plan, that relates more so to things like wetlands and more environmental features that might be sensitive, such as waterways. The items in which you mentioned would fall under a ministry's jurisdiction and wouldn't necessarily be addressed through the policies of the official plan. And there are protocols at the various ministries in relation to these types of businesses that those ministries would be able to answer those questions and direct you in the way that you could get answers. I think that's kind of the only two items I can really respond to. I do want to note that prior to the establishment of the exception zone on the property for the business, the property was zoned rural, not specifically rural residential, which, as Ms. Murray had pointed out, also allowed for some additional uses, which would have included residential at the time and home-based businesses. When the zoning happened in 2020, it did restrict it just to that specific use. If I've missed anything, let me know. I'd happy to follow up. I was taking note while you were speaking, but I think some of the other items that Ms. Bradshaw brought up can be addressed by Mr. Rivington.
Okay, so I'll turn to the applicant and their representative to make any other comment, please. And then I'll turn it back to council. Thank you.
Hello? I think maybe I'll just speak quickly to the zoning, and then I'll let Mr. Rivington speak to the questions. So I do understand that the two property owners have met regarding the drainage questions, and I think these seats are very low. And I think Mr. Rivington addressed that. I don't maybe want to read out the whole list, but I did just want to highlight that the zoning bylaw amendment before you is not really related specifically to the toilet operation. It's asking to add these 12 to 13 sort of descriptive list of uses that we've gone through with the Director of Planning and determined jointly that these were all acceptable equivalent uses. For example, equipment sales and rental, office, workshop, warehouse, outdoor storage. So the idea is just adding language so that there's a bit of flexibility. I do understand it sounds like there's some concerns between the two neighbors about the ongoing operations. So I will let Mr. Rivington just respond briefly to those, I guess, regarding the environmental permits that are in place. But just related to the zoning, we're happy to answer any questions about the specific uses that are proposed, but that's really the amendment that is before you, is adding those uses.
Great, thanks. So Mr. Rivington, final word to you.
Okay, as far as the environmental concerns, the point was made about transferring from truck to truck for the sewage from a smaller truck to a larger truck. We're permitted to do that by the Ministry of Environment. We have a C of A, and it's covered off on that we're allowed to do that. Okay, and as far as the washing of toilets, it's no more different than washing your car. Like, the toilets are all pumped out, the sewage is out of them, and we're just, washing the inside and out of them. And all that was, when we went for site plan on that was all discussed, and that was never, and then as far as, yeah, I mean, those are the environmental concerns, and
Okay.
okay.
Certainly, so just, Ms. Martin, just for clarity, and I thank the applicant's representative as well, absolutely, we're looking at considering this evening a diversification of use on the property, which could be helpful in the future for permission when it comes to using the property for other things other than a portable toilet business, correct? So obviously this is to go beyond the current use and to potentially consider other activities that appear to be suitable for these lands in this location. So I just want to ask Ms. Martin, should a property owner have some concerns about the management of the portable toilet operation, it is through the conservation authorities or through the Ministry of Environment that recourse can be sought there? Where does one go?
Thank you, Your Worship. So it's going to depend on the matter at hand in regards to some of the concerns that were raised with the transferring of waste between different vehicles. Mr. Rivington is right that he would have and does have the required compliance from the approval from the ministry, so they would be the appropriate body to address it through.
Ministry of Environment.
That is correct. There is, if any resident ever has a concern about a potential spill or something that they think isn't being done in conformity with provincial regulations as it relates to whether it's a subject business or anybody undertaking any kind of dumping of waste, there is a spills number that individuals can call. I do want to note that if it's related to the site development and the original site plan approval, that's something that the municipality has the authority to review. We do have an agreed upon site plan, and that's something that we would be able to go out and enforce if they're not in conformity with it, which would either require they gain compliance by sticking to the original plan or seeking an amendment to the site plan agreement to address those if appropriate.
Okay. I just wanted to note that there is or has been an effort to provide additional land buffering in the area. Is that ongoing or has that been completed?
Thank you, Your Worship. That is ongoing. It's in its final stages of completion. The severances were granted by the counties, and we're just in the clearance of the condition stage. But it does not impact Ms. Bradshaw's property. She was not. Oh, it does? Oh, sorry. It does. Sorry. Yeah, I think there were some lands that were being given to her, as well as some of the other properties on McGovern Road, just to give them that land for an additional buffer
Great.
from the business.
Okay. Okay, that sounds great. I'll go back to council one more time, and then we're going to consider the recommendation, please. Councillor Sullivan?
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor, to Mr. Rivington's agent. You mentioned, and I just want to clarify, you mentioned when you first spoke about the prior to the 2020 rezoning, that many of these uses were permitted at that time? I think you said something that these were permitted, and then after that zoning, it was limited to only the portable toilet business?
So I have it in front of me just for reference, but prior to the rezoning, it was a general rural zone, which allowed for, a list of items, not these same uses, but allowed, for example, for agricultural uses, equestrian center, forestry, hunter fishing camp, sugar bush, building structures that are accessory to that. So not the same uses, but a much longer list of uses than once the zoning bylaw, which sought to add a permitted use, once it was approved. I think the owner had agreed with planning staff at the time to restrict it just to only the mobile toilet use, but I don't know that that was fully understood by, I don't know that it was fully understood by everybody that would really restrict the use to only one thing on the property forever, so it wasn't the same uses, but there was a list of 12 or 14 permitted uses before that were general rural.
Okay, thank you for that. And then to Ms. Bradshaw, is there a berm, a buffer between your property and the business?
Yes, there is a berm on all three sides. So the north, the east, the west and the south side, there is a berm. The berm at the back of my property on the west side is actually not on his property. It's fully on my property, 20 feet into my property.
So that was there
So I
before?
lost land that way because there's a drainage ditch to the left or to the south. So the berm was built very far in, not with my actual property line. It starts 8 feet from the property line. So there is a berm there, but I'm not too sure if it should have been built so far onto my property. There's a small berm on the north side. However, the last time I looked, there is an opening on the east side of about 1 meter. So the water can still drain onto the property, which is still his. And as the land does slope from north to south, any water from there is going to keep flowing downhill. So to answer your question, there are berms in place, yes.
Okay, and tree buffers?
And there's tree buffers on my property that were there before I purchased, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Councillor Strachan?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Director Martin. I guess we're talking about the permitted uses and the previous permitted uses, understanding that what's requested today is different from what was there previously. Was there a reason to restrict to the single use that it's currently zoned as for this property? Was there a particular rationale that was used to come to that decision?
Through your worship to Councillor Strachan, back in 2020, I wasn't the planner on the file, but my recollection at the time was due to neighborhood concern of many of the residents in the area about establishing just more general highway commercial type uses on the property. So restricting it to that mobile septic and portable toilet business was one way at the time of I guess, easing some of the concerns of the residents that there wouldn't be, say, like a gas station or other heavier type commercial uses being established on the property. From a planning perspective, we do restrict uses where there might be some concern from the public that heavier type commercial uses would be located in what is a rural residential area, but our policies do allow for rural commercial uses. So that is my understanding as to why at the time, back in 2020, it was just restricted to what they wanted to do. And now Mr. Rivington is coming forward and seeking to add some additional permitted uses that we do have examples in other areas in the municipality where these types of commercial uses have been established in the rural area.
Good. All right. So once again, the focus of this particular recommendation from staff is to add additional permitted uses. We've heard rationales. We thank members of the public for coming forward and flagging some ongoing concerns. But really the decision tonight is around the additional uses. So I'm going to look to a mover and a seconder, please, for consideration of the recommendation, please. Would anyone like to move? Councillor Sullivan? Thank you. Do we have a seconder? No seconder? Councillor Strachan? All right. Good. All right. So I'll hear any comments or concerns around the motion that we've now moved, that council approve and enact bylaw 10823 to rezone the lands at 686 County Road 44 to add additional permitted uses. Any final concerns, council? Or questions?
Yep. Through you, Madam Mayor, to Director Martin. Back in 2020, when the zoning amendment came to us, there was an agreed upon site plan, I understand. Now there seems to be some issues with drainage and stormwater. Do we know that the drainage plan that was submitted, I imagine a drainage plan was submitted or a lot grading plan was submitted? Do we know that that was constructed as designed?
Through your worship to the Deputy Mayor, so part of the site plan process, so the zoning would have happened first and then the site plan control application would have come second once the use was established as a permitted use. There was a requirement for stormwater management, grading and drainage plan. As part of site plan sign-off, we do receive certifications and our public works and engineering staff do go out and verify that they've been constructed as according to plan, that things are in the right location, and we do require the developer or the property owner to provide us with their engineering certifications on those items. What I do want to add is that, you know, if there are concerns about site plan and things change over time, staff are, you know, more than amenable to go out on site and take a look to ensure that the site plan agreement, including all the agreed upon engineering documents, are being upheld and that things haven't been modified. And if they do deviate from the approved site plan, we do have remedies through the site plan agreement to address that.
And how would that be triggered?
It's complaint based, so we would follow up based on a formal complaint received by a neighboring property owner or any individual of the public. We do have a system where individuals can reach directly out to planning staff, but we also have an online complaint system as well.
Okay, great. So just before calling the question, I just want to say that I believe I'm favorable to the recommendation, only in that it certainly expands the possibility of use on this property, and to forever designate this property as only a portable star toilet usage, I don't think would necessarily be that satisfying to the community or to prospective future owners or to this owner who may want to diversify. it's not clear whether or not he's going to be in the portable toilet business forever. So this seems to be a way to entertain other uses over time that might be more suitable to some of the community who may feel that portable toilets isn't the only appropriate or the best use of this land, if you will. So from my perspective, I see it as creating other possibilities, which in fact, at the end of the day, may be better received by certainly neighbors or members of the community. So I'll call a question on this and see where we get. All in favor of the motion, please. All right, it carries, thank you. So we're going to move on, because it's a long night ahead, to our zoning bylaw amendment, 1023, 640 Jig Street. The council approve and enact bylaw 10923 to amend the zoning for 640 Jig Street. And I understand, Ms. Martin, you have a presentation.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I do. Let's wait for the presentation. So our final public meeting tonight is for 640 Jig Street. It is for a surplus dwelling severance. So this is a condition of severance that the retained lands have to be rezoned to prohibit residential dwellings. The property is located in the agricultural designation in the rural area of the municipality. It is a large parcel of land. There is a water course that runs through the property, and there is a floodplain that buffers out from it. I do note that the zoning of the floodplain will not be changing. It will remain, and that's not being impacted by the amendment this evening. Just an aerial photograph that you can see the property is actively farmed. So the official plan designation of the property is agriculture, floodplain hazard, and there is some identified mineral aggregate reserve. The zoning is currently agriculture 1 and flooding, erosion and protection zone, and it's 100 acres in size, and it's subject to consent application 6422. As per our policies of the provincial policy statement, where we have a surplus dwelling severance, the remainder of the land is to be rezoned to prohibit a residential use on the property, which further protects that use for agricultural purposes. The official plan at the county level is very much so the same. It mimics the provincial policy statement, and we do have some additional policies from a severance perspective. We consider surplus residential consents for farm dwellings that existed on or before January 1st of 1994, and we have confirmed that it met the intent of the policy. Here's the area that will be rezoned to prohibit residential uses. It's most of the 100 acres, minus the area being carved out for the surplus dwelling. We have received no comments from members of the public, and we have received no letters of concern from any of our agencies. It's a pretty standard zoning bylaw amendment that results from a surplus dwelling severance. So it's our recommendation that council support the recommendation to rezone these lands. Thank you.
Great. This is another public meeting, if I'm not mistaken?
That's
All right.
correct.
So with that in mind, I don't see any members of the public who are here for this meeting. Doing a round, don't see anyone. Okay, so just once we have that established, council colleagues, any questions here in regards to this proposed development? So the only thing that does come to mind, Ms. Martin, is drainage, because certainly if you put 7 properties on a lot or on a, I mean, it's a very generous lot. It's 10.2 acres, is my understanding of the size. Is that correct?
I think that's our next application.
Oh, I'm on the wrong one. Okay, thank you. Oh, I jumped one. Yes, I did. I apologize. Okay, so regardless, let me ask the drainage question then. How would you anticipate drainage being managed?
I'm not certain if this property is tile drained, but it very much so may be. It's a large agricultural parcel. There is a water course at the back, so there would be some natural drainage that would happen to that water course if it's not already tile drained.
Okay, great. So you have no concerns at the present time? Okay, great. Colleagues, anything else? Any other questions in regards to this one? Okay. All right, so then I'll read the recommendation. The council approve and enact bylaw 10923 to amend the zoning for 640 Jig Street from Ag 1 to Agricultural 2. So I will look for a mover and seconder then, please. Mover? I need a seconder. Thank you, Councillors Barclay and O'Sullivan. So I will call a question on this. All in favor? Good? Okay, that carries. I was ahead of myself. I apologize. All right, so we are now going to move to K-point 7.2. Is that correct? All right. And is this a public meeting, just to be clear? No. So we're out of our public meeting phase. And Ms. Wood, I regret I did not close the public meeting for that last decision, but consider it closed. All right, so over to you, Ms. Martin, again for Archstone Oxford Mills subdivision.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a reminder to council that we held the original public meeting for the zoning bylaw amendment and the plan of subdivision back in August 10th of 2022, so well over a year ago. We deferred the decision on the zoning amendment at the time to allow for some more further conversation on the additional dwelling unit piece and some further considerations as we went through some discussions in regards to parkland requirements, if we were going to seek to gain some lands. We made a determination that just given the constraints of the floodplain and the property that we weren't going to ask for lands to be given to the municipality even for a passive park. So the draft plan approval was granted on September 11th of this year. So they do have approvals, one of which is a requirement that the property be rezoned to help move the development forward. So the provided zoning bylaw amendment, very similar to one we considered at our September meeting in regards to additional residential units. So the hydrogeological and terrain analysis associated with the proposed plan of subdivision recognized limitations on the number of additional residential units that could be supported based on the hydrology of the area and the terrain. So the applicant is proposing to rezone 2 lots where they would include the additional residential units, and those are identified by the square hatching. And then language is added in just to say that we're not restricting future additional residential units. However, additional studies would be required to ensure that those additional residential units could be supported on private well and septic. The lined hatched area are lots where, again, similar to the same clause is added. No additional residential unit could be considered until such a time that the appropriate studies are provided to recognize whether or not the additional residential units could be supported on private services. In the area that's denoted in the dotted area, it stays, that's the flood zone, the floodplain zone, it still stays floodplain, that will not change. And the zoning would put it to a residential first density zone, which allows for smaller lot sizes, which helps accommodate some of the lots, which are quite significant in size, just in general. So we did receive comments as part of the original zoning bylaw amendment and public meeting from members of the public. Those were addressed as part of that process, more so through the plan of subdivision, and we have not received any further comment past our August 10th, 2022 public meeting. Agency comments were addressed as part of the draft plan approval process, so there's 2 processes that were happening at the same time. So typically you'll see that many of those comments get addressed through the draft plan approval process. So it's staff's recommendation that we pass a zoning bylaw amendment that recognizes the limitations for additional residential units within the proposed subdivision and identifying the requirement for those additional studies. Thank you.
Great. Council colleagues, any questions for Ms. Martin in regards to this? So ultimately, Ms. Martin, the addition of the provision for 2 additional residential units is conceptual or will be part of what is built here?
My understanding, Your Worship, is that they're proposed to be included as part of those units.
So they're within the primary dwelling?
Yes, they could be part of the primary dwelling, or it could be an accessory structure in the on the property as well. We do allow for both of those options in the rural and in the urban area.
Right. So it's a 7-lot subdivision on 10 acres?
That is correct.
Okay. And with that in mind, what you are bringing to us is a provision or a stipulation that 2 additional residential units can be accommodated. They may not be built, but they can be accommodated, or they will be built.
Unfortunately, developer's not here to speak to that. I believe their intent was to provide that opportunity for the units, the dwellings to be built with an additional residential unit. I'd have to review the draft conditions specifically in regards to the language around that. But the intent of the zoning more so is to identify which lots would be suitable for those additional residential units, and then recognizing what you would have to do to establish more.
Indeed. And do we have any opportunity to compel the developer to include those additional dwelling units?
I believe we addressed that through the draft conditions, but I'd have to review the specific wording in the draft conditions to see how it's stated. But the intent was, when we're dealing with subdivisions with additional residential units, is to have, single detached dwellings or semis or townhouse units, is the additional residential units are seen as an acceptable way of providing an affordable unit. I know we've had a lot of discussion around this table about, is that truly affordable? But it provides opportunities for multi-generational housing. It helps create an income to help offset the cost of operating the home itself. So it's one approach in which we're trying to work with developers, especially in the rural area where you do run into limitations in regards to hydrology and terrain and private servicing, to encourage where we can those additional residential units.
So the motion before, the recommendation before us this evening is to amend the zoning so that the additional residential units can be accommodated. Whether or not the draft conditions compel the developer to build the additional dwelling units is not clear to me, nor you at this stage.
I would have to pull the draft conditions, Your Worship.
And the
to
draft
read specific.
conditions were adopted in August?
They were approved by the counties on September 11th, 2023.
Okay. All right, if you could bring back that information, that would be most appreciated.
Yep.
I'll just look to council colleagues for any other questions. If not, then I will look for a motion that council approve, a mover and a seconder rather, that council approve and enact bylaw 11023 to amend lands at concession 4, part of lot 7, geographic township of Oxford and Rideau, from RU to residential first density exception 46 and residential first density exception 47, and flooding and erosion protection zone. Mover and seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Strachan. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. In the absence of other hands, I'm going to call the vote. All in favor, please. Thank you. That carries. All right. I think we're now on to our last item, which is Equinel Phase 2H and Phase 6 proposed draft conditions.
Perfect. Thank you, Your Worship. Our last matter this evening on the planning agenda is in regards to recommended draft conditions related to the more recent phase of Equinel. The application was circulated in February of 2022 by the United Counties. Public meetings were held for the subdivision and zoning amendment back in January of this year. The zoning amendment has been approved for this development. So the document submitted as part of the subdivision process includes a planning rationale, stormwater management report, site servicing report, environmental impact study, archaeological study, traffic impact study, geotechnical report, and environmental site assessment. So these are not small undertakings. A lot of assessment goes into whether or not the development can be supported. And a lot of back and forth was had on layout, design, traffic, and certainly a lot of discussion around Settlers Trail. So the draft conditions are proposed to address a variety of issues, including stormwater management, affordable housing, traffic impacts. I do want to note to council that in coordination and with the developer, there's been a lot of discussion over our draft conditions in regards to Settlers Trail. I do have a slide. I'll go into in a little more detail. And I just wanted to highlight that during the public meetings that was one of the major concerns that was really highlighted by members of the public who were in attendance. Settlers Trail is a very highly used recreational path by residents of both Equinel and Settlers Trail, Settlers Grant subdivision. And so there was a recognition to ensure that, should the development proceed, that the appropriate measures are done to provide some protections in the way of traffic calming and a construction management plan when there is construction over the trail. We have provisions in regards to water and wastewater infrastructure, and I do want to highlight that capacity has been allocated for this phase of development. Road infrastructure, parkland dedication, and financial security requirements are also addressed through draft plan conditions. And as kind of alluded to, we have put forth recommendations of draft conditions in regards to a construction management plan around Settlers Trail. So the intent would be the development would be phased in 3 phases. It is intended that in the last phase of development, which is considered phase 6C, that's where the traffic management plan would come into play, or the construction, management plan would be required, and that would address how our controls going to be put into place to ensure that the users of the trail can continue to use that trail in a safe manner, and ensuring that the access to the construction sites is restricted. There are laws around that. We do have a recommendation as well as a draft condition in regards to the traffic impact study, or it's an impact statement that was provided, that it be updated just to recommend traffic calming measures, focusing on pedestrian safety around all crossings of the Settlers Trail. So there's been some lengthy discussions as to how that can be achieved, and I know there's more to come on that because the crossing will eventually connect into a future development on another property. So it's staff's recommendation at this time that council supports the proposed draft conditions for the phases 2H and 6 of the Equinol subdivision to the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville, who are the approval authority for plans of subdivision for the municipality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the careful consideration of impacts on Settlers Trail. I have a couple of questions, but I'll defer to council colleagues prior to. Okay. Not seeing any hands. I just wanted to ask about cash in lieu of parkland. I can see that there is a provision here, number 6 of draft conditions, which speaks to the owner conveys up to 5% of the land included in the plan to the municipality of North Grenville for a park or other public recreational uses. Alternately, there may be cash in lieu. As I'm sure you're abundantly aware, this council is not a big believer in cash in lieu if, in fact, there's rationale for another park within a very dynamic and growing neighborhood. So I'm curious to see why that is there. Has the municipality landed on an additional park within Equinol? I know there was some discussion around that in regards to subsequent phases, and I haven't really seen it emerge over the last 18 months.
Thank you, Your Worship. So there will be a park provided within this phase of development. It's located right at the corner of what would be Equinol Drive and Black Horse. So that is contemplated, and those lands will be provided. So it'll be kind of more of like a local park for the residents within that corner of Equinol.
And why do the draft conditions name either as possible, parkland or cash in lieu?
So it's up to 5% of land. So if they don't meet that 5% of land commitment, we can take the remainder of the balance as cash in lieu. So it gives you both of those options. I believe that given the land that will be dedicated, it meets that 5% threshold.
Okay. And at what point does it become an imperative and not an option? Sometimes we see developers proposing parks and then withdrawing from that commitment. So my concern around the language, notwithstanding your very good explanation, is could we find ourselves in this situation again?
Thank you for the question, Your Worship. The park is identified on the draft M plan, so that's how it will be entrenched, is through that draft M plan. So it's actually draft M, it's called an M plan. It shows you the layout of the subdivision, including if there's parkland where the roads are located. It shows you the lot fabric for the lots that'll be created, the blocks for the townhouse units. Those are all identified essentially it's a map of the development.
So it's not a marketing plan, it's a document with legal authority?
That is correct.
Okay, great. The other thing is as you and I are aware, we got a email from Mr. Carl Cannon in regards to some concerns around the option of 20% of homes being available for accommodation of an additional dwelling unit, presumably a granny suite. I know the concerns expressed, and I believe it's our obligation to at least name them this evening, is that because it's an option, it could mean that only 2% of homeowners opt for an additional dwelling unit. The threshold here identified is 20%, but the uptake obviously could be less. So just curious to know your thoughts on where we stand in regards to this aspect of the development. We know it's much harder sometimes with subdivisions to create that affordability, if you will, in the way that we might envision it as a council. So I appreciate your comment on Mr. Cannon's submission.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So in regards to the affordable housing provision of the draft condition, in discussion with the developer, we identified that the lots that would be most appropriate to accommodate an additional residential unit within the dwelling constitutes about 20% of the development. So that's based on lot sizes and frontages that would help meet the municipality's policies in regards to things like parking, but as well as creating an adequate living space. This is a condition that has been invoked in previous phases of the Equinel subdivision, so it is a carry forward that we've implemented. I am aware that Equinel has developed specific models with the additional residential unit built in, and we have seen some uptake. As for the number of units, I don't have the statistic in front of me. I'd have to consult with our building division, but there have been some homes in Phase 5 and in other parts of the subdivision that are incorporating them into their homes. The way that the condition is worded, my main concern would be putting in a hard imperative that 20% must include an additional residential unit is the ability to clear that condition in the future. So registration cannot happen until we clear our conditions and the county is satisfied that the conditions of the draft plan have been met. The concern would be that it's, from a home ownership perspective, it's put out to the free market, and it's a little harder to control than, say, our rental units, which we've had quite a few applications come forward where we have more authority from site plan control and being able to address affordable rents. Ownership is a different beast. So the way that the draft condition has been worded provides some flexibility for Regional Group and Equinel to market those units, but it doesn't put them in a position where they can't sell those lots that have been identified, that they must have an additional residential unit until that time that they find that right buyer.
So when it's 60 townhouse dwellings, is that what's being proposed here?
That is correct.
So 60 residential units?
There's townhouse units, Your Worship. There's
Oh, it
also
says
single detached.
165, I see it.
There's also single detached units as well. So the intent would be, it would be on the single detached dwelling units where
Understood,
they
yes.
have there's already a pre-designed model that Equinel's created that has that additional residential unit. And that's it's part of their marketing package, is my understanding. Ms. Kaminsky is here from Regional Group. If you would like to put the question to her, she can maybe explain some of the efforts that they've been making in regards to creating more
Yes.
opportunities for it.
That would be great. And I didn't realize she was here, so please, I would welcome a bit of additional context. I'm just trying to get my head around the number of residential units proposed.
Thank you so much.
It's 194, okay. So 20% optional affordable housing, I think my challenge is, sure, maybe only 7%, right, of the prospective homeowners opt for an additional dwelling unit. But because of today's market conditions and because of the needs of today's demographic. But these homes are with us for decades, for generations. So in some respects, we forfeit the opportunity for a future home buyer, right, down the road, to be able to opt into that additional dwelling unit if it's not built. I know that you can retrofit, certainly, additional dwelling units, or you can add them subsequent to a home being established. But the tension here, of course, is as we add an additional 195 homes to this subdivision, we're really at the whim of those immediate home purchasers about what they foresee and wish for their home. But we're not thinking 20 years out when these homes will be, or 5 years out when these homes will be sold and purchased by others who maybe at that time would have appreciated the additional dwelling unit. And I appreciate we're not in the business of over-regulating the private market, clearly, but at the same time, we're trying to build a community here. And it's, I appreciate the difficulty we are in as a municipality. I appreciate what Mr. Carl Cannon is saying. I appreciate the perspective of Equinel that wants to sell viable homes that are attractive to prospective homeowners. But as a municipality with very limited rental options, with very limited options in the rental market or for those seeking multi-generational housing situations, we have not been well served by the decisions of the past. So I feel that in some cases we're sort of perpetuating a status quo to some extent. And I don't know how to change that, but I just have to put it on the record that I struggle with this. I struggle with this piece of what's being proposed. But I'm sorry, I don't know your last name.
Oh, through your
Yes.
worship, I do see a question up on
Yes.
council. I'm not
Go
sure
ahead, Councillor O'Sullivan.
You could answer the mayor's questions first or comment on that first, if you like.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Through your worship, thank you for having me. My name is Stephanie Kaminsky. I'm the project manager with Regional Group on behalf of Equinel Developments, Inc. We are the developer of the Equinel community. I've been working on the file personally for over 3 years now. We understand that the issue of affordability is at the top of many municipalities' lists, and we are extremely conscious of that, and we do everything in partnership with EQ Homes to try and serve the community as best as we can. I think one component that is extremely important to consider in this situation is context and location. So this is a golf course oriented community that does not have great access to public transportation. It's not located in the downtown core. It's not conducive to heavily affordable housing units. One of the ways that we have counteracted that, just knowing based on the location and the context that we're dealing with, that affordability is a challenge. One of the aspects that we've done is we've partnered with the Habitat for Humanity build Kentville Corners. We have donated a significant amount to that build, and we're very close partners with Habitat for Humanity. That's a very important cause to us, and in that case, it's a project that's located in the downtown core. It has access to public transportation. It's providing a number of families, or will provide a number of families, options to affordable housing units. The other item that we have to consider is that we are introducing a number of more affordable models. So in the case of these single detached townhomes that have the possibility or are offered with this secondary dwelling unit, they are arguably more expensive than some other units that we're offering. So one of the components that we've definitely taken a look at for phase 6 is to introduce more townhomes, more two-story townhomes off of what we've built in phase 5. That's done very well. It's much more suitable to new homeowners, younger families, those who are looking for a more affordable option. So again, given the context and the strains that we have with the project, that's another way that we've found to address some of the housing needs in the area. Again, I completely understand your concerns, but as Ms. Martin has mentioned, it's extremely difficult, and I would not recommend that it be phrased in a way that it is mandatory. As Ms. Martin mentioned, we cannot control the market. It would be extremely, extremely risky to have it worded in that fashion where we wouldn't be able to satisfy that condition. And I believe to date we have sold 2 models with the secondary dwelling units. So the requirement for 20% of those homes to be sold with that secondary dwelling unit would be highly, highly concerning for us as the developer. I hope you can understand the context that we're dealing with, but I hope some of the other ways that we've addressed affordable housing units satisfied some of your concerns.
Thank you. I appreciate the explanation. When you say you've only sold 2 homes with ADUs, is that for existing phases?
Correct. That would be in our phase 5.
And what's the total number of units in phase 5?
It's a good question. I don't know the exact number. The secondary dwelling units are proposed on our 33-foot lots and our 50-foot lots. So it would depend on the total number that we have in that phase. I'd have to confirm and get back to Ms. Martin.
I'll acknowledge Councillor Sullivan. I think you had a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you to the project manager. I'm sorry, I missed your name. I have a couple of questions to clarify the numbers. The beginning here says that the purpose is for the development of 194 residential units. And then in item 1 on page 92, it says a total of 165 single detached dwellings and 4 residential blocks for a total of 60 townhouse dwellings, which comes up to 225 units. And if 20% of the 165 will have or could have or should have additional dwelling units, that's an additional 33. So potentially this is 258 residences not 194. So those numbers aren't adding up for me. And my other question, it's more a comment than a question regarding Habitat for Humanity being more appropriate because there's public transportation available. When there's public transportation available, it would be the same availability at Equinel as it is at Habitat for Humanity. It wouldn't be any different. And so it's still walking or biking distance to the downtown area. So, but my question is about the number of units. Thank you.
Ms. Martin?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll respond more so on how it's structured, is that we don't consider the additional residential units as part of the unit count when it comes forward. So it's for 165 single detached dwelling units and then the 60 townhouse dwelling units. We wouldn't put in how many additional dwelling units would be considered because they are additional to the use. So you're not establishing two residents on the property. Like, you are creating an apartment unit, whether it's inside the existing dwelling or an accessory structure. And typically in an Equinel home, it would be in the existing dwelling because there wouldn't be much space to create a backyard unit that's detached. But we don't consider that as part of the approvals in the sense of like when you're doing the number of units that are accounted for. And the same thing goes for our capacity allocation. We wouldn't require them to apply for that additional capacity for that one additional residential unit.
Okay, thank you. It still doesn't add up, though. 165 plus 60 is 225, and the first page says for the development of 194.
I will admit that is a typo.
Oh, okay. So which is it? 225?
It is, sorry, Your Worship, through to Councillor Sullivan, as presented in the draft conditions.
225. Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Barclay, go ahead.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, to Director Martin, just to follow up on an early comment that the Mayor made regarding cash in lieu of parkland. I'm looking at the draft condition number 6, where it says, alternatively, the municipality may require cash in lieu for all or a portion of the conveyance. So it's my understanding that it's at the discretion of the municipality whether we take cash or not at the discretion of the developer, which, okay, thanks.
Understood. What I'm interested in when it comes to that is clarity, a conviction on the part of the municipality that we will insist on a park. If that is in fact that discussion that's been had. And as you know, we're retroactively trying to go back to a subdivision and build a park where we think one should have been established as the development was being built. So we just don't want to have to do that again because it's very complicated.
If I may add, Your Worship, it certainly is, it will be required, and it's something that we've been actively working with Regional Group on in regards to ensuring that there's a park, and we've been having discussions as to the timing of the construction of that park. So it is very much so the intent of Regional Group and the municipality to make that come to life.
Right, Councillor Starkian?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. I think on the topic of the ARUs, I think we've had this conversation many times about whether or not that's considered affordable housing. I think it's questionable. I think it improves the housing affordability within North Grenville and certainly provides alternative options. But however, like we have seen in previous presentations, I think the free market will dictate what the free market dictates, and I think it's a challenge when housing is proposed for sale and then saying that we're also offering affordability housing. I don't think those two are necessarily in line, and I saw Mr. Cannon's comments regarding what the municipality is insisting upon, and I don't think we've landed on the solution that actually says that we should be in a position to say 20% must happen at the risk of a successful development as well and the conditions that are surrounding it. So I, as much as I would like to see those ARUs in place and to see that be successful, I don't think that we can impose it at this point, and that the developer and the groups working on this development come together and find a way of marketing and encouraging people to go invest in the pre-sale with an ARU, then I think that that is likely the best outcome for all. Thank you.
So I think it's important to be honest and upfront in these conversations. I think it's fair to say that Equinel, for the most part, can't provide the housing affordability that we strive for. I think it's fantastic to offer an additional residential unit as a means to creating some of that capacity down the road for affordability. But if we only have 2% of prospective purchasers that wish to go down that path, then I don't think we are anywhere near the 25%, the 15%, the 10% that we've set as a goal when it comes to certain developments. So, you know, my concern is that at this stage, Section 32 says the owner acknowledges and agrees that the development shall address housing affordability to the satisfaction of the municipality of North Grenville in the following ways. So I think moving forward, I don't think it's a discussion for this evening, but Carl Cannon is a very credible CAO, former land use planner. It would seem that perhaps other municipalities have a model of contemplating how to, in fact, accommodate affordability in the context of subdivisions that are growing. I would like to say that we are launching a public transit system that's municipal-wide, that'll be on demand, that some of the concerns that were raised about needing to be downtown are not necessarily valid into the future, because there will be options, no matter where you live in North Grenville, to access a public transit system. So I don't think that certain subdivisions are necessarily off limits, if you will. And I am not diminishing Equinel. I very much value you and the work over many, many years. So I in no way want to disparage the excellent work and the very high quality of life that you offer in Equinel. But at the same time, we are often finding ourselves in these conversations where the reality or the end result in terms of some of the proposed affordability provisions don't actually give us the satisfaction that we would like, and they burden the community further. So that's where I sit on this, but I think I've made it abundantly clear that I think we have more work to do. I'll look for other comments before bringing this to a vote. We have a recommendation before us. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you to Director Martin. Item 32 that the Mayor was just speaking about, provide 20% of new homes offered for sale with optional pre-designed secondary dwelling units as a means of providing affordable rental options. So does that mean that the owner of this property with the additional unit is limited in who she can rent to and limited in the amount of rent they can charge? I actually personally know someone who got into the housing market by buying a property with an additional unit in it, and he's a young man, young couple, and the only way they could get started with this house was knowing that they had the additional unit to help cover the cost of the mortgage. And actually, it's rented for $1,800 a month for a one-bedroom. Now, that's in Kitchener, but anyway, are they limited to providing affordable rental options, or can they charge market value for this? If there's a lovely one-bedroom unit in a house, can they charge market value? Are they limited?
Through your worship to Councillor Sullivan, the draft condition would not provide any limitations on the rent that is charged. What I do want to note is that, I mean, it would again be controlled by the free market as to how the rent's established for those additional residential units. I wouldn't have the necessary mechanisms from a legal perspective to go and say that if you put an additional residential unit in, you'd have to charge X rent, which is considered affordable at that time of year, or at that specific time and place. a little easier for us to do through the site plan control process, because again, that's a different type of agreement which we enter into. We have a little more control in that regard. But what I do want to highlight is that an additional residential unit, it creates housing affordability for that individual that you're referring to. It offsets the cost of their mortgage, which makes their place a little more affordable for them to live. But it's, we've also seen the practice of additional residential units being used for multi-generational housing, where an individual has a parent, a grandparent, they might have a child who needs a little more dependency on a parent, occupy that space, and they may be charging them minimal or no rent, and they take it over, so that person still has that. So in that instance, that becomes a very affordable option to that individual who may be restricted elsewhere, especially when it comes to finding care options. I mean, we have a system that's quite overloaded already on the public side, and private care can be very costly. So we're seeing more of those opportunities coming forward with individuals who will try and keep those relatives with them. So it does create different types of housing affordability, but we would, just to answer the core of the question, we would have no control over that rent of the additional residential unit. There are, and I do want to stress, the counties do have programs available for anyone wishing to establish an additional residential unit that would help create that affordable price point, but provide some money around that to support that. And certainly happy to talk to any member of the public and put them in contact with Caroline Ragudo at the counties on that one. So.
Thank you very much. I mean, I agree that there's certainly lots of value to having the additional unit, but it is possible that they could be renting it for market value. Yep. Okay, thank you.
Good plug on the secondary suite program. Appreciate that. It still remains a very active program with the counties. Councillor Strachan.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. And to Director Martin, I agree with the points that you're making about the variety of options that it presents by having these additional residential units, these secondary dwelling units. And certainly it does change the options available for the community, for residents, and a pathway towards home ownership. And certainly, if this is an attractive model, then I would expect that people would take them up on the offer and go down that route and say, yes, that does make sense for me, and perhaps they will see an uptick in that kind of sale. I would question much to what I said previously about housing affordability and to what Councillor O'Sullivan has mentioned. The wording affordable rental options, I find that very challenging. I think if we leave it as additional rental options or additional, take the word affordable out of there, because I think it is, people struggle with that word as to what affordable means, what that definition actually truly means. And if there's no control over it, then I don't think we can say that without a doubt that would be considered affordable. And $1,800 for a one-bedroom unit would not be unreasonable to see in North Grenville. I think that we have seen those kind of costs, rental options already available in different circumstances. So I don't know what control we have over this document at this stage and where we can put it, change those words, but I would like to see the word affordable removed, if possible.
If I may, Your Worship. So council does have the ability to amend if they would like. You would need to move a motion to amend the draft conditions, as they are they are an attachment to the motion to strike the word affordable out of section item 32I.
And if we're removing it from I, it begs the question of whether or not we remove it from the main section of 32.
Sorry, through you, Madam Mayor. It does say housing affordability in the main part as opposed to affordable housing, which I think.
I think you mean affordable rental options. That's what we're referring to
Yes.
in I.
So the main part is housing affordability, and the part I is affordable rental options, and I think those are not the same thing. So my concern is with the second, the subsection I.
So while we're amending 32, I would like to propose that the main section of 32 say the owner acknowledges and agrees that the development shall address housing affordability within the municipality of North Grenville.
Can you do that, or do you want me to do it for you?
I'm not, I think, what do you require in order to make these changes? Do you need a motion, or can we? Okay, so we have a motion to, in the first section of 32, change the words to the satisfaction of, to replace those words with one word, which is within the municipality of North Grenville. And the second part of that motion is to remove affordable within Part I, which precedes rental options. So I'll look to a mover and a seconder for that, please. Deputy Mayor Barclay and Councillor Strachan, thank you. All right, so I'm going to call the question on that unless there's further comment. Is it part of the? No, this is no, this is a motion on the amendment, which is specific to section 32. Okay, so I'm going to call the question on the amendment. All in favor? All right. Okay, so with that in mind, we are back to the main recommendation, which is that council recommends to the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville the draft conditions provided in attachment A for phase 2H and 6. Any further comments from council colleagues? All right, Councillor Barclay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And this is to the project manager, the regional group project manager. I think you're getting a message loud and clear. And at the risk of piling on, I'd just like to challenge the regional group that you understand that we're having difficulty with this 20% additional dwelling units. So I would challenge the regional group if they can come back with some other ideas that might satisfy the municipality's aspirational goal of at least 25% affordability. Now, you know the market best, but you're in the business of building homes, and hopefully you'll, because I no doubt you have a commitment, you've expressed it already to the issue of affordability. So I would just challenge the regional group to maybe come back with some different alternative measures to satisfy that goal of ours. Thanks.
Good. Are we good then? The motion's on the table. The recommendation has been advanced. I'll call the question unless there's anything else. All right. All in favor? Good. That carries. Okay. Under Public Works, nothing this evening. I don't believe we have any correspondence to consider. No other business. I do not expect there's any notice of motions. Any notice of motions, colleagues? Introduction and consideration of bylaws. I believe we've done that already. Questions from members of the public or the media? Not seeing any. So we're going to go to the close of meeting. Confirmation bylaw, that bylaw 11123 to confirm proceedings of council at its regular meeting held on November 8th, 2023 be adopted and passed. I'll look for a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Strachan, Councillor Sullivan, thank you. Calling the question, all in favor? And motion to adjourn. That is that we adjourn at 8:24 p.m., which is not so bad, given the number of items on the agenda this evening. I'll look for a mover and a seconder. Deputy Mayor Barclay, Councillor Strachan, thank you. Calling the question on adjournment at 8:25. All in favor? Good. Motion carries. Thank you.